Operation Klondike Aftermath. With the fall of Black Brian on the 26th of May 2822, the last effective resistance to the clans had ended. Sporadic clashes continued with rogue elements for the next 18 months, but these were isolated incidents. The work of individuals who wouldn't accept the status quo, and for the most part the population accepted their new overlords without question. After 2 decades of bloody conflict and deprivation, even the most cynical saw the clan's arrival as the end of their suffering, a strong and cohesive power block that would bring peace and prosperity to the general populace. The clans likewise saw the people of the Pentagon as a gift to be cherished, wayward children who had been abused for years, but who could now be redeemed through discipline and love. It would be a tough, authoritarian love, but it was more tenderness and mercy than they had seen in a generation. The people accepted their new membership in clan society with scarcely a whisper. Indeed, many would see Nicholas Kerensky as their saviour, resulting in the rapid growth of a cult of personality that elevated him to a messianic status and which ensured his dominance over clan society. Every member of the Pentagon civil populace was subject to rigorous profiling and testing, their skills assayed and their experience measured. Through this process, each survivor was assigned to the caste that best suited their skills. The population of each world was then divided between the victorious clans and absorbed into their civilian castes, placed under the stewardship of the caste leaders already established during Nicholas's exile, but with a clear understanding that ongoing testing would govern their status within the populace. The militias of the Pentagon's numerous city-states and proto-nations were dismantled by the clans, and most of their troops returned to civilian life. A few clans, most notably the Star Adders, chose to exploit this trained soldiery, and after stringent screening and testing, incorporated them into their townments. Such recruits would never be eligible for blood name, but that didn't mean they couldn't contribute to their clan's martial prowess, and even, as Ethan Moreau of the Goliath Scorpions demonstrated, rise to a high office. Though he had remained in the Pentagon rather than siding with Nicholas, Moreau was forgiven by the Il Khan, and was designated the clan's lawmaster by 2824. That such clans chose strength over ideological purity was something that would cause tension, not only in the immediate post-war years, but all through the centuries of clan history. The coursing. The assaying process also brought to light the former leaders of the Pentagon, the warlords and despots and thugs who had maintained a reign of terror for the best part of 2 decades. Many had died in the clan assault, either killed battling the invaders or slain by a vengeful populace, but no small number remained at large to be hunted down in a post-conquest operation that the clans dubbed the coursing. Some were held pending clan justice, and a few cases surrendered themselves to the clan authorities, but many sought to hide themselves amongst the populace, masquerading as innocent victims rather than the perpetrators of atrocity. Officially none succeeded, though this is most likely clan propaganda, and it seems likely that a small number did escape justice. Most were tracked down by clan agents or betrayed by vengeful neighbours. Some took their own lives rather than face Nicholas's wrath, but one by one, the former overlords of the Pentagon were paraded before military courts and found guilty of crimes ranging from treason and genocide to extortion, kidnapping, and racketeering. Once arraigned before the courts, almost no one was acquitted, and the punishment was most often execution by firing squad. Less serious crimes were not presented to the military courts, but rather were handled via civil meetings in which the guilty were forced to confess their sins and face public humiliation and violence. Called thamsing, after a similar practice employed by an old Terran power, this allowed the populace to exact its own measure of vengeance and underline the destruction of the old power structures and establish the new clan order. They became willing partners in Nicholas's new society, their quest for vengeance making them complicit in the remoulding of society. For 6 months after the end of combat operations, these courts and brutal meetings predominated, taking place alongside the military's rebuilding efforts and the mainstreaming of the civilian populace. But by early 2823, a more ordered society was beginning to emerge. This society had clear divisions between civilians and workers, between intelligentsia and labourers. It was also a place where the clan rather than the individual was what mattered. Ironically, while the civilian castes were happy at these changes, signs of friction soon became apparent within the military elite. Fracture lines. Many personal scars from the campaign remained too. All of the clan warriors witnessed a succession of atrocities during Operation Klondike. At the time, this had fortified their resolve, allowing them to achieve victory despite the odds being stacked against them. But in the months and years that followed, the mental scars healed less quickly than did the physical wounds. Initially, at least, these scars manifested as dissatisfaction with the Ilkhan. In more extreme cases, it manifested in a broad range of psychological issues, including the depression of the Coyotes' Khan Dana Kufal, which prompted her self-exile, and the madness exhibited by Viper Khan, Ellie Kinnison. The warriors of the clans had gone into Operation Klondike with a clear sense of purpose. The crusade was as much idealistic as it was military. While they wholeheartedly supported the punishment of the warlords, allowing the civilian populace to wage its own campaign of vengeance didn't sit well with them at all. There were whispers that without his brother's moderating influence, Nicholas would exploit the situation, using it to bind the populace to the Ilkhan personally, rather than to the clans as a whole. As the first anniversary of the liberation approached, these simmering tensions reached boiling point. In many clans there was debate of Kerensky's methods and agenda, though it was frequently couched in such a way as to avoid direct criticism. Surprisingly, it was the Jade Falcons who crossed that line and provoked a reaction from the Ilkhan. Dismayed at Kerensky's decision to merge his bloodline with those of Clan Wolf, tempers rose within the Falcons, and after a year of increasing criticism, some hardliners proposed the establishment of a separate society. This suggestion caught Kerensky's attention, but before his wrath could be brought to bear against the rebels, the Falcon Khans took decisive action. They executed the ringleaders and sent many of the other critics into pseudo-exile on exploration missions or harsh duties, the actions known collectively as the culling. The Falcons weren't the only clan to undergo a period of introspection. The Star Adders fought a war of words with their comrades over decisions to bring non-clan warriors into their ranks, while Sea Fox deviated from Kerensky's ideals by suggesting that equality between the castes would result in a stronger society. Then came the Wolverine treachery. The Jade Falcons had headed off a confrontation with the Ilkhan through the decisive action of the culling, but the clan later referred to as the Nameless Clan or the Not Named Clan, their identity as the Wolverines an open secret, were less fortunate. The official tale of their disgrace is well known, despite efforts to erase their identity from existence. Roughly a year after the end of Klondike, there was a disagreement, some sources say military clash, over control of a Brian cache between the Wolverines and the Snow Ravens. When that went against them, the Wolverines declared independence from the clans and were subsequently annihilated. Official records of the incident were largely expunged, but a number of items remain that cast light on the events. There are inconsistencies in the records that have led to the Wolverines being cited as the most popular focus of conspiracy buffs' attentions for the last 30 years. That there is little hard data on the fall of the clan has resulted in a whole matter of rumour and theory. To the clans, that there was treachery is enough. They believe there were survivors, and some elements remain on their guard for those to return, and the horror of the events shaped their psyche and ensured they would follow the path that Nicholas had laid down for them. New Order. Any thoughts of rebellion against Kerensky's rule died with the Wolverines. The remaining 19 clans threw themselves into a strenuous effort to prove their orthodoxy to the Ilkhan, dealing with the dissidents in their ranks with brutal efficiency, or else risk the intervention in their affairs by outsiders. The ideological differences we know today as the Warden and Crusader philosophies were a long way from being formed. Back then you were wholeheartedly committed to the ideal, or you were an outsider and dealt with accordingly. The old social lines that marked Star League society in its more recent incarnation in the Kerensky Exodus were forbidden. No longer were the sigils of the great houses permitted, nor were their customs and languages. Within 18 months, everything that would mark an individual as Lyran, Curitan or Freeworlder was stripped away. The trappings of the Federated Sons of the Capellan Confederation and innumerable periphery states were confined to museums and historical documents. Even House Cameron and the Terran Confederacy was stricken from public life in what Kerensky called an effort to protect its dignity and gravitas. In their place came the insignia of the clans, both their individual markings and the overarching insignias derived from Star League symbology. Language and culture didn't escape these changes. The plethora of languages used in the Inner Sphere were relegated to the history books, and instead Star League English, already the lingua franca of the exiles, would be the sole language used in clan society. Use of any other language outside of an academic context would be punished severely. though Nicholas did allow a 5-year transition period during which punishment wouldn't be enforced. After the 1st of January 2830, however, the full weight of clan law would fall upon offenders. Compliance was absolute. Erasing cultural traits of a nationalistic bent was more problematic. While overt displays were easy to police, governing how people thought and acted was a different matter. The clan solution was twofold: a series of efforts to instill clan values in the citizenry, but also through language. Standardizing his new society around the English language was not enough for Nicholas. He codified language and grammatical structures in such a way to straitjacket the thought process of the people, a tactic familiar to students of 20th century literature wherein one work of fiction lent its author's name to a social paradigm. Orwellian. Resistance to these efforts was surprisingly weak, usually attributed to the populace's desire to build a new and more prosperous future for themselves. They drew a line under the horrors of 2 decades of conflict and the exodus before it. No matter that, in doing so, they would permanently be relegated to the status of second-class citizen, with even marriages being mandated by the state to maximize genetic potential. The price was high, but it was one they were willing to pay. Each clan was responsible for fostering a sense of belonging amongst its members, and a sense of clan pride quickly replaced the nationalism of the past. Testing within the clans instilled a sense of the fate of each individual would now lie in their own hands, which indeed it did, within societal limit. This meritocracy would lead to homeostasis for the entire society. In that regard, Kerensky succeeded where other attempts to forge a social utopia had failed. Such ideals soon outgrew the individual clans, and the idea of trials, already enshrined in clan thinking, became the mechanism by which politics between the clans would take place. It wasn't long before the egalitarian division of the people, in the words of the Kerensky cluster, and the Pentagon became a focus for trials between the clans, with population centres and factory complexes the prizes of a succession of trials of possession. It was in this crucible that the unique characteristics of each clan would come to the fore, each with widely different traits and attitudes, but still within the overarching ideology of the clans. As with any homeostatic entity, a sense of balance existed within clan society, and when something deviated from the norm, the system, in the form of the other clans, brought the errant element back into line. Usually this was a mild chastisement, but sometimes it was much, much more. Death and rebirth. By the early 2830s, 10 years after Klondike, clan society had recovered from the nightmare of the Civil War. The population had been restored, and the first generations of children from the iron wombs were undergoing schooling in the warrior castes. Food supply and industry were at an all-time high, and new colonies were to be built to meet the demand for resources. Much of clan society had begun to take on its modern form. The balance of power between the castes remained delicate, however. The military elite ruled each of the clans, but the attitude of the warriors toward the other castes varied considerably. The Wolves and Sea Fox clans were notable for the freedoms that they allowed their merchant castes, something that had allowed the Wolves to rebuild from their battles against the not-named clan, though others considered such attitudes as dangerous and against the spirit of the clans. A mercantile dispute between the Wolves and the Widowmakers, resolved as now by traditional martial trials, provided the catalyst that brought the initial phase of clan society to a close. Jealous of the freedoms of the Wolf merchants, the Widowmaker merchants staged what amounted to an insurrection against their military leadership, appealing directly to the Grand Council for the censure of Khan Jorgensen, who had risen to the Khanship after Jason Carragher's death during the Wolverine treachery. The military, under auspices of their authority to deal with internal matters as they saw fit, responded harshly, arresting the dissidents and executing the ringleaders. This act shocked the other clans, regarded as unduly harsh even by their standards, but the Widowmaker's accusation of Wolf complicity in the uprising stirred Khan Jerome Winston into action. The Wolf Khan suggested that the Widowmaker's brutality had abrogated their right to rule, and that their assets should be distributed amongst the other clans. The motion passed the Grand Council unanimously. The Widowmakers abstained, but as expected, Jorgensen called for a trial of refusal, seeking to restore the status quo, despite the rebuke issued by the council. On the 7th of October 2834, the trial took place on Stites Plains of Ironhold, the Jade Falcon capital, and saw 10 stars of Widowmakers facing off against 11 stars of Wolves. Winston commanded the wolves, and Jorgensen the Widowmakers, with the Khans of every other clan serving as witness. The larger battle was fierce, but soon paled into insignificance compared to the duel between Jorgensen and Winston, a trial of grievance within the larger trial of refusal. The other combatants became spectators to one of the bitterest clashes between the clans, a clash that looked set to give victory to the Wolf Khan, though this was not meant to be. A cadre of Widowmaker warriors chose to break Zelbringen and interfered in the battle, ostensibly to save the life of their Khan. This egregious flouting of clan law prompted the umpires to intervene and separate the combatants. Nicholas Kerensky took charge of this effort, and for several minutes a wild melee ensued. And at the end, order was restored, but at a great cost. The ill Khan had been slain. The Golden Age. The initial reaction to Kerensky's death was an orgy of bloodletting against the Widowmaker warriors, who were largely annihilated. The few survivors were absorbed into the wolves along with all the Widowmaker civilians and assets. Ironically, Khan Jorgensen survived the battle. That he claimed the slaying of Nicholas was an accident carried no weight with the tribunal, and he was executed after a trial. From here, matters could have followed two diverging paths. Had Kerensky's death occurred a few years prior, the divisiveness within the clans could have shattered the nascent society and sent it spiralling into another round of violence, seemingly the fate of every empire built on a cult of personality. Or a new leader could have emerged around which the power structures coalesced, possibly taking matters in another direction. In actuality, neither occurred. The political dynamics were sufficiently stable not to tear the clans apart, and clan society was sufficiently self-reliant to prevail without a strong central leadership. The clans never were a monolithic entity, but rather a confederation of interlinked but interdependent states. In the years that followed, their paths diverged, but the clans prospered as a whole, and individually leading into the years of 2830 to 2930, it was referred to as the Golden Century. As clan society metamorphosed and grew, so did its technologies. Unlike the other parts of the Inner Sphere, which lost many of its advanced Star League technologies during the centuries of the Succession Wars, Nicholas's second exodus had preserved many of the systems that the SLDF had escaped with, and in short order, their scientists were building on these, refining them, and making new leaps. The Coyotes developed the modular technology of the Mercury-class battlemech into the concept we now know as an Omnimech in 2854, and the commercial exoskeleton technology in common use in Terran hegemony systems was developed into the elemental battle armor a decade or so later. Medical technology, in particular genetics, soared far above what even the Star League could have dreamt of. Yet most of these advances were driven by or for the benefit of the military. The living conditions of the civil populace remained austere, a tacit understanding that the tech and resources should benefit the warrior and allow them to fulfill their mission. In many regards, however, the clans hampered their own efforts. With the castes specialised, the population small, and the knowledge tightly controlled, there was no opportunity for cross-pollination of ideas, and the intuitive leaps that had marked the Age of Enlightenment, a millennium prior, or even the Second Enlightenment of the Star League. As such, while they made progress, it was slow and methodical, and in their 2 centuries of exile produced only modest results. In stark contrast, in the 15 years between the end of the clan invasion and the outbreak of the jihad in the Inner Sphere, it made comparable advances, and while not replicating all clan technology, was capable of duplicating most of it on at least a limited scale. Indeed, had the jihad not intervened, a number of technical analysts believe the Inner Sphere would have overtaken the clans by the mid-3080s. And so ends Operation Klondike, the second of my LoreWarrior campaign videos, or lore videos. Sorry, my throat is a little bit screwed over after reading some of those. They're very long entries in the Operation Klondike book. A very good book if you are a fan of the clans. It's well worth a read. There's a lot more information in there. Specifically about a lot of the personalities. Scrolling through it now, they have write-ups on Nicholas Kerensky, Andrei Kerensky, Jerome Winston, pretty much all the leaders of the different disparate clans at the time. The book also has a lot of the early information as well, stuff about the actual Second Exodus, but I didn't want to include that because I felt that it being an operation, I think it would have been better if it was just about the actual military stuff rather than going through all of the background information there. A majority of you will already know anyway the basics of it, that obviously Alexander Kerensky arrived, set up 5 worlds, everything seemed good for a while, then everything turned to crap. He died, de Chevalier died, and his son took over, and they went and they formed another society a little bit further out in the Strana-Meshti system and beyond. And, you know, this I thought was interesting because the first LoreWarrior campaign series I did was Tukid, essentially the defeat of the clans. And Klondike is pretty good, I think, as a second one to choose because it's the rise of the clans. It's where they first kind of, got together and performed their first military, like large-scale military action. And yeah, it's interesting. The stuff about the Wolverines I thought was quite enlightening. I love the write-up for it, the way that each clan was broken down by world and how they had to attack these different locations. Some of the enemy factions they fought against were quite interesting. I liked a couple of the ones that still tried to hold to the old Star League ideals, or the others that would even attempt to sort of act almost a bit clan-like themselves. It was kind of interesting. I like that overall. As you've probably seen by now, I'm recording this before I've even gathered all of the imagery, but I do apologize if any of these videos sort of may have had long amounts of static imagery, or may have just been using a lot of images of mechs and stuff, because honestly, as big as this book is, which I think is just shy of 200 pages, actually the amount of art in the book isn't particularly high. There are some interesting bits and pieces back there, especially a bizarre looking version of the Hoplite, or Hoplite. But there really isn't a huge amount of just artwork to pick and choose from, which is a bit of a shame. So I do apologize for that if it was a little bit static, but I know a lot of people will just sort of put this crap on in the background. I say crap because it's just me reading a book. Anyone can fucking do it, as others have said in the past. I believe a comment I did get a chuckle out of on one of the Solaris videos was, yes, I can also read the Solaris book. It's like, well, go do it then. But yeah, I know some people just stick these on in the background, so you may not even see any images anyway, which is perfectly fine. This is what I want from these. But yeah, really good book, Klondike. Pick it up as PDF or as a Dead Tree version if you can. If you want to sort of read the entire thing yourself, or maybe hear it in a different cadence. But there's some interesting stuff in there. It's pretty good. I quite like putting this together. I think I've already got ideas for what the next one will be, to be honest. I'm looking at potentially doing the Galtor campaign, which is... I wanted to do something in Sphere, rather than it being focused on Clan v in the Sphere or Clan v Clan, or something like that. I wanted to do one that was 2 of the Great Houses, and the Galtor campaign is a really interesting series of events. Good at its classics, Federated Sons versus Draconis Combine, and I'm looking forward to reading through that one and making lots of mistakes, probably mispronouncing certain areas, certain parts of words. As I'm aware, I know there will be some native speakers, Slovak speakers, or Russian speakers and such, who may have heard some of the locations and winced. I do apologise. Once again, I will state that the word hegemony is the English pronunciation, as in British English, as I am well aware of the American pronunciation is hegemony in America. You aren't wrong. That is just how you pronounce it. It's different over here. Guess what? There are differences. So if you feel furious and you have to type out the comment like, oh my god, you didn't say it the way that I was taught to say it, that's because people get taught to say words differently. So don't worry about that. It's no different from when a native French speaker from Le France will hear a French Canadian speak, and they will also wince, apparently, because apparently the French spoken there is different. I can't hear it, but hey, French do. So yeah, don't freak out, okay? Other than that, thanks everybody for listening through this entire series. I think collectively the whole thing must be over an hour, which is why it's been broken down into parts. But yeah, it was quite fun. I did like going through this one. It's been a long time coming, but I mean, a rough plan. No idea if this is actually going to be Galtor campaign, then Luthien, which is another really good book. Probably the the Historical Liberation of Terra 1 and 2. That one's good. That one's going to be a fucker, but I do want to do that. It's classic. It's Star League. It involves the Periphery campaign, and then obviously the campaign against the Amaris forces. Some really, really good stuff there. And then some other bits and pieces as we go through. I don't know how often LoreWarrior campaigns will come about. So there'll obviously still be normal Lore Warriors come out, mercenaries and mechs and vehicles and jump ships and drop ships, and maybe the occasional personnel one. I did do that bounty hunter one a long time ago, and I do keep thinking maybe I should go back to one of those at some point, but sorry, my throat's still a bit knackered. But yeah, that's sort of rough plan with the campaign stuff. Other than that, yeah, it's been fun. It's been good. I'm glad that this one got finished. Because I've had this one on the back burner, going through it on weekends and stuff when I've had like quiet times during the day to sit down and record large chunks of the book, and that's so yeah, I'm quite happy with the result of that one, and I'm just happy to keep doing BattleTech related stuff really, so that's always fun. So have a good one, everybody. Thanks for listening again. Hope you have a good week or weekend whenever you listen to this, or a good drive if you're in the car while you're listening to this. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks again. Bye. 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 Clans suck.